It's tough to transition a story from a linear to an interactive medium. A good film does not have the same features as a good game. However, filmmakers that have a genuine interest in the gaming industry can frequently collaborate with developers who have a similar passion for the material they're making interactive. These games are worth a go, regardless of prior familiarity or love for the source material. Stay tuned as we list down the top 15 finest movie-based video games. First, Batman on the NES did The Dark Knight justice. Sunsoft's Batman for the NES was arguably the first quality title to star the Dark Knight, based on the 1989 Tim Burton film of the same name. The game tapped into the Cape Crusaders' martial arts prowess and gadgets, allowing players to wall jump, punch, and toss batarangs with precision and ease. The combination of platforming and action was easily comparable to other titles on the system, such as Mega Man or Ninja Gaiden. The presentation was also excellent, with dark 8-bit noir visuals and upbeat music. Next, players took control of creatures in Little Nemo the Dream Master. In Little Nemo the Dream Master for the NES, Capcom immersed players in the whimsical world of Winsor McCay. The game, a tie-in to the 1989 animated film Little Nemo: Adventures in Slumberland, was a 2D platformer in which players could control a variety of creatures and use their unique abilities. Nemo would require all his assistants to find the 6 keys hidden in each game's brutally tricky levels. In addition to hostile creatures, even friendly ones could cause harm before Nemo calmed them down by feeding them candy. Moving on, Mad Max brought the apocalyptic wasteland to life. Despite being released around the same time as Mad Max Fury Road, the Mad Max video game is not a direct adaptation. Instead, the game draws on the world building of all 4 films to create an original story with similar themes and messages to the movie. Mad Max is an open-world action-adventure game focusing on vehicular travel and combat while conserving as much ammo as possible. It manages to be a worthwhile love letter to the entire franchise rather than being overly reliant on one single film, telling a story on par with several films. Following that, Scarface: The World Is Yours follows up a beloved classic. Many video games based on films retell the film's story as their own, which risks boring audiences or telling a story that's inappropriate for the medium. Scarface: The World Is Yours avoids this fate by establishing itself as a quasi-sequel, exploring an alternate series of events in which Tony Montana survives the final assault on his mansion. The game places the player in Montana's shoes as he attempts to rebuild his empire. It's an open-world crime simulator that owes a debt to Grand Theft Auto. Next, The Thing manages to keep distrust and paranoia in a third-person shooter. The Thing, one of the most beloved horror films of all time, has a video game adaptation released in 2002. Rather than a first-person survival horror experience, the game is a third-person shooter with social and horror elements, incorporating key elements from the film while adding action to create a more entertaining game. Despite its more action-packed focus, The Thing remains a tense and nervous affair, retaining much of the feel of its predecessor. NPCs have varying levels of trust for the player, depending on how certain they are that the player character isn't the Thing, emulating the film's omnipresent paranoia. Moving on, Peter Jackson's King Kong was a fantastical journey through Skull Island. Filmmaker Peter Jackson, a massive fan of the 2003 title Beyond Good and Evil, sought designer Michael Ansel to create the game adaptation of his King Kong remake. As a result, Skull Island becomes a dangerous and fantastic adventure. Voice talent from the film included Jack Black, Naomi Watts, and Adrian Brody. The game's final section even let players control the giant ape himself, in a section that recreated the iconic showdown with the planes on the Empire State Building. Following that, Ratchet & Clank was a culmination of everything great about the series. Ratchet & Clank for the PS4 was based on the movie based on the PlayStation 2 title of the same name. It was essentially a synthesis of all the best aspects of the series. The already excellent gunplay was refined with improved controls and new mechanics. Players could arm themselves with fan favorites like the Suppinator and the Groovier, and new weapons like the Pixelizer. Ratchet & Clank was the most visually stunning entry in the series before Rift Apart, with its colorful locales and cinematic animations. Next, Kingdom Hearts 2 combines Disney fun with Final Fantasy storytelling. The Kingdom Hearts franchise is based on Disney animated canon, while telling a completely original story set in its world. As strong as the Final Fantasy elements are in the games, they have Disney at their heart and center, stringing together the worlds of several Disney films in each entry. Many of the games in the franchise have fans, but one of the most popular is Kingdom Hearts 2, with its excellent combat gameplay, its own emotionally charged story, and the inclusion of beloved Disney films such as Beauty and the Beast, Pirates of the Caribbean, and The Lion King. Moving on, Middle-earth's Shadow of Mordor's Nemesis system breathed new life into open-world games. With its unique Nemesis system, Shadow of Mordor revitalized the open-world genre. The enemy orcs all had distinct distinct appearances, personalities, and flaws. When an orc killed Talion, they were promoted and boasted about the player's humiliating defeat when they were re-encountered. Talion could also benefit from this system. If players helped an orc rise through the army's ranks, they could gather intelligence on more powerful war chiefs, or even fight alongside Talion. The game also incorporated the best elements of other great sandbox titles, such as Assassin's Creed, while excellently using the Lord of the Rings setting. Following that, Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis was an adventure on par with the films. The Fate of Atlantis refines aspects of the graphic adventure adaptation of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, telling an original story free of the constraints of another medium. In contrast to other graphical adventure games, Fate of Atlantis had multiple solutions to the game's many puzzles. Players could use their wits, fists, or partner Sophia to get through the adventure. As a result, one Fate of Atlantis playthrough was insufficient to see everything the game had to offer. Furthermore, the plot, characters, and dialogue are the same high quality as in the original trilogy. Next, The Chronicles of Riddick: Escape from Butcher Bay is what it says on the tin and more. Occasionally, a video game outperforms the film it was designed to promote. Chronicles of Riddick: Escape from Butcher Bay, one of the best examples of this phenomenon, combined elements of stealth, melee combat, and first-person shooting to significant effect in an atmospheric journey through a deadly intergalactic prison. Because there were no heads-up displays or objective pointers, players could fully immerse themselves in Butcher Bay's dark and gritty corridors. Moving on, Alien Isolation captures the terror of its source material. Aliens Colonial Marines is one of several underwhelming or downright lousy video game adaptations of the Alien franchise. However, one game, Alien Isolation, perfectly captures the feel of the original Alien, while also being an excellent game and story in its own right. While it tells an initial story, the first Alien film heavily influences the game's tone and gameplay. The player takes control of a survivor of a xenomorph outbreak who must rely on stealth, wits, and luck to avoid capture. The game is both terrifying and compelling, and it manages to be an excellent Alien game and one of the best horror video games in recent years. Following that, GoldenEye 007 revolutionized shooters. GoldenEye 007 was initially intended to be a simple 3D rail shooter like Virtua Cop, but it eventually evolved into the first-person shooter that would revolutionize the genre. Levels, unlike Quake, were not simply a journey from the beginning to the end of the stage. Bond must complete specific missions based on the difficulty of each GoldenEye level. Of course, no discussion of GoldenEye would be complete without mentioning its multiplayer mode. The game featured characters from the franchise's history and a plethora of weapons, and the split-screen 4-player matches helped GoldenEye become the N64's premier multiplayer game. Next, players forged their destiny in Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. Players in Knights of the Old Republic could choose from 3 different classes and shape their destinies through dialogue choices. The Star Wars galaxy was essentially the player's oyster, as they could play an honorable Jedi who defends the weak, a scoundrel who accepts bounty hunter jobs, or even a cold and calculating Sith Lord. Players could harness the power of the Force as they progressed and leveled up, essentially the game's version of spells. BioWare's talents for crafting engaging stories, characters, and dialogue are fully displayed, outshining Lucas's prequel trilogy efforts. And finally, players could do whatever a spider can in Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2 is a perfect example of what every video game based on a pre-existing property should aspire to be, realizing the potential of its protagonist with the wide-open sandbox environment of New York City. It brilliantly executes the elements of the source material that would make for engaging gameplay. Spider-Man 2 was the first game to feature the now standard web-swinging mechanic, an open-world setting for the wall crawler, whereas previous Spidey entries treated web-swinging as if it were a double jump or flying. Swinging in this entry was a cathartic game in and of itself. Well, that marks the end of our video for today. We hope you enjoyed it. On your way out, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.